Lord Kobu's been saved, Boruto's a hero, Kashin Koji's a probable murderer, Sarada's going blind, and next chapter, we get to see Daemon fight. All that is to say is chapter 31 of Boruto's 2 Blue Vortex has officially leaked. And man alive, are things crazy. This chapter has some crazy twists and turns. It has Sai confronting Shikamaru. It has the Mushi fighting amongst each other as their intellect drops. It shows the highest level of Sarada's Ohirame usage yet, and leaves us with an almost patented at this point absolute banger 2 Blue Vortex cliffhanger. All that is to say is that this week we got a lot to get into, so let's get into it. So no further ado, let's dive directly into Chapter 31 of 2 Blue Vortex's review. But before we get to reviewing anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're looking for one additional NC Hammer 23 video every single week, guys, you can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series using the fourth wall link in my description below. We are finally starting the final fights. So before we dive into today's review, I want to tell everyone out there that I don't have the full English translations for this chapter. I have really high quality raw scans, some summaries, and my basic ability to read some Japanese. And while usually I would probably wait until the English translations came out to do this kind of video, fortunately this chapter is almost entirely combat. So I got a pretty good idea of what happened. So chapter 31 starts off where chapter 30 left off. That is to say, with Kobu getting stared down by a bunch of Mushi clones. And considering the fact that in the last chapter, Kashin Koji, through the medium of a toad he placed on Kobu, attacked the Mushi clones with a water bullet, the Mushis, who at this point have seen a massive intellectual drop, have identified not only Kobu as a threat, but also as somebody who needs to die. And that's kind of a shift that you're gonna see in all of the Mushis this chapter, because the dumber they get, the more bloodthirsty they become. And thus all that is to say is that the chapter opens up with 6 or so Mushis staring down at Lord Kobu, letting him know that if he doesn't let them know where Eida is, he'll die. And Kashin Koji, through the medium of the toad placed on Kobu, begins to tell Inojin, hey listen, they're gonna kill this guy. And if you're in this body when they kill this guy, well, you're gonna die too, because that's how mind transmission jutsu works, which is kind of funny that he's explaining how mind transmission jutsu works to a Yamanaka, but whatever. And while Inojin is fully aware that these Mushis will kill Lord Kobu, he lets Kashin Koji know that he's not going to abandon him because Lord Kobu is a civilian, which, you know, is kind of exactly what we anticipated. Well, yes, it would have been fun to watch the Mushis kill Lord Kobu and have to watch Inojin deal with the blood on his hands. We know, even though Ikimoto has been playing with the idea of stretching out these moral boundaries, those moral boundaries are never going to be crossed by at least the main cast. And thus, even though Inojin will also die if he's in Lord Kobu's body, when he dies, he makes a commitment to himself and Lord Kobu to save his life. But Kashin Koji keeps pressing him, saying if you don't release control of Lord Kobu, you will also die, and the village will die. Because without Inojin's new ability to map out the location of all of the Mushi, using the individuals he's connected to as radio towers that blast out frequencies that show the Mushi's locations, the fighting forces of Konoha will stand no chance. But even so, as the Mushis lunge towards Lord Kobu, Inojin controls his body to leap out of the way, dodging the incoming blows. However, he's barely able to dodge them, considering the fact that he's controlling an older civilian, whose reaction time is dull and movements are slow. But this infuriates Kashin Koji as he asks Inojin what he's doing. But it's this point that Inojin lets Kashin Koji know that there will be no purpose to him becoming a ninja if he lets civilians die. So yeah, like I said, even though we talked about the fact that there is technically a possibility that Lord Kobu could die at the hands of these Mushi, when it comes down to it, Lord Kobu is going to either be saved by Inojin or by Boruto. And in the case of the chapter, well, I guess we were right in both regards. We then cut away from Inojin, Kashin Koji, and Lord Kobu to check in with Eida and Daemon, who are seemingly just at their house. And I mean, I guess like as long as you have Daemon there, Eida's kind of safe wherever. But like, I don't know, put him in an underground bunker or something. Like, people absolutely know where Eida and Daemon live. They fly around the village together. But I guess like they do technically live up in the hills, so it's a non-populated area, so a good area to have a gigantic, possibly village-destroying battle. But still, I don't know, odd choice. Anyways, when we flash over to Eida and Daemon, we see that Eida is hugging a pillow. She's obviously like really concerned about everything happening in Konoha right now, considering the fact that it's, well, all about her. And while she does love attention, I mean, she literally manifested a Shinjutsu to get more attention. I'd imagine this isn't the kind of attention she was looking for. But while Eida hugs her pillow, she laments about how she wants Inojin to restart his mind transmission jutsu so she can see what's going on, which obviously is kind of interesting because Eida is basically the Palantir of the Boruto universe, which is to say that her Senrigan is basically the best information gathering tool we've ever seen. She can literally see everything that's going on Earth simultaneously. So if anybody was able to keep up with what was going on now that the mind transmission jutsu was down, it should be Eida. And this is the exact same question that Daemon asks. He goes, well, why don't you just use your Senrigan? To which Eida responds to by saying that the last time that she used her Senrigan, specifically on the Shinju, or I guess more specifically on Mamushi, Mamushi was able to see her. And therefore she fears if she tries to use her Senrigan to check into Mamushi's location right now, Mamushi will see her right back. And while Mamushi is seeing her right back, Mamushi will be able to see her surroundings and possibly her location. And while that is obviously a legitimate concern, it seems as though we're at the point in progression in terms of Mamushi's multiplying that I don't think an individual Mamushi would have the ability to discern what Eida's surroundings looked like and what that meant in terms of finding her. I mean, yeah, he'd probably see that she's sitting on a couch, maybe next to Daemon, but that would just tell him that she's on a couch. And if Mamushi either knew where Eida's house was or was going to be told where Eida's house was, you'd assume he would check that anyways. But there is the possibility, obviously, that Mushi would be able to hone in on where the Senrigan was being used and get a pinpoint location for Eida, which obviously wouldn't be good. And now this perplexes Daemon, who goes, oh wait, so is his ability not just to multiply? Implying that Mamushi not only has the ability to multiply infinitely, but also that his counter-intelligence, or his counter to the Senrigan, is also some kind of innate ability. But to me, that doesn't make a huge amount of sense, considering the fact that if he did have some kind of counter to the Senrigan, maybe something that operated somewhat similarly, you would assume he'd be able to find Eida much sooner. This is one of the panels that I fully plan on rereading when the official translation comes out, because there might be a little lost in translation here. Anyways, we then cut to Sarada and Delta. We're watching from an adjacent roof a horde of Mamushi interrogate Konoha civilians about Eida's location. And this horde of Mamushi says that while they haven't located Eida yet, the second they see her somewhere in Konoha, they will apprehend her immediately. However, even though some of the Mamushi clones are seemingly still trying to coordinate this search party in a somewhat civilized manner, other clones are seemingly getting impatient. Because as some of the Mamushis go around interrogating civilians, asking for Eida's details, some of the other clones begin to scream, when are we going to find her? And this builds tension between the clones who have made no progress on finding the one woman they've been trying to. And thus the previously cool-headed clone that said that the second that they found Eida, they'd apprehend her and take her away from here, transforms his fist into that of a club and levels the one that screamed at him. And he continues to wail on this other clone, yelling, shut up, I'm working on it. Now this obviously throws both Delta and Sarada into a fair amount of shock, as they begin to realize that Mamushi has split into so many copies of himself that his intellect has dropped to a point that the clones have just begun to rampage. Further backed up by the clone who was screaming at the impatient clone that he was beating down on, launches a mouthful of fire onto the Mamushi and torches him, which causes all of the civilians that they were interrogating to scatter. We then cut to Shikamaru and Sai. And Sai is pressing Shikamaru, because obviously in the last chapter he very clearly saw that Inojin had taken over control of Lord Kobu, which means that not only is Inojin openly acting as a traitor against the Land of Fire, but also that he's in a fair to decent amount of danger. And thus Sai is asking Shikamaru, tell me Shikamaru, what's happening with Inojin? Is he okay? But Shikamaru kind of skirts the question and says the enemy is a humanoid Shinju by the name of Mamushi. His aim is not Konoha, but Eida. To which Sai rather coldly says, this is the first I'm hearing about it. Where did you get this information? But Shikamaru once again skirts the question. He says, listen, Sai, right now is not the time to talk about any of this. But Sai, rather appropriately on account of the fact that he was affected by omnipotence and is the head of the Anbu, says, but I take responsibility for this interrogation. So answer me, Shikamaru. I don't want to have to get rough with you. And listen, while that might not be an important fight, it is one I would kind of like to see. Because if we're being honest, Sai's probably at the strongest he's ever been. I mean, he's the head of the Anbu. He's definitely, like, still training. And Shikamaru's probably at the weakest he's ever been on account of the fact that he's been Hokage for 3 years and hasn't been involved in a fight. He's just been pushing paper. But Shikamaru has pulled off some crazy feats in Boruto, like halting the movements of Kinshiki with a shadow paralysis jutsu. So if it came down to blows between these two, I mean, I'd like to say Shikamaru would win, but it'd probably be Sai. But anyways, in response to Sai's kind of threat, Shikamaru tells Sai, listen, you misunderstand me, Sai. I understand your concern for Inojin, but as parents, we have to put our careers as shinobi first. Especially in situations like this, we prioritize the civilians and our village. And it's kind of cool to hear from Shikamaru, one, because obviously Shikadai is involved in the battle, but two, because of how Shikamaru's father died, Shukaku and Inochi, Ino and Shikamaru's fathers, were effectively the mind of the Shinobi Alliance, and they both got killed simultaneously by the Ten Tails. But in that moment, rather than being concerned about leaving their children behind, they were concerned about leaving the Shinobi Alliance behind. And this is kind of cool to see Shikamaru follow in the steps of his father. And seemingly, this gets through to Sai, as he glares at Shikamaru, but then closes his eyes and goes, okay. Starting with that mission in the sand, you're carrying out another secret mission right now, aren't you? Tell me, what do you need me to do? And listen, I'd like to remind all of you that Sai was affected by omnipotence, but this is the kind of loyalty you look for in your head of the Ambu. Anyways, we then cut back to Sarada and Delta, who are watching over the brawl take place between all the Mamushi clones. Civilians scatter, and after one Mamushi clocks another, that Mamushi falls down next to a civilian who's tripped. And seemingly either pissed about all the infighting between Mamushis, or just so dumb that he wants to destroy anything around him, this Mamushi goes to attack that civilian, just laying on the ground. But before he can, he begins to float. And it's at this moment that we see Sarada descending down from the roof, or Hirame activated. And with 4 black suns floating behind her, we once again punch in on her right eye to see her sun-designed Mangekyo Sharingan. Once again, really hammering home the idea that Ohirame is Sarada's right Mangekyo Sharingan ability. Not her left eye, not both, just her right eye, implying that she has another Mangekyo Sharingan ability that we have yet to see. But more on that in a minute. And in the next page, we see all of the Mamushi that were in the square begin to float up into the sky, but the civilians staying down. Now, this makes sense because of what we know about Ohirame, in that it allows for Sarada to selectively choose the things affected by the gravity of her black holes. But obviously, this strange girl descending down from a roof and floating up into the sky has caught all of these relatively stupid Mamushi off guard, and thus, as they float in the air, they're simply confused. However, one of the Mamushi, still on the ground, sees that Sarada's back is turned to him. But as he lunges towards her blind spot to spike her out of the air, Sarada's eyes flash backwards, and immediately he's affected by the gravity of the black holes. And immediately after catching him into the gravity of Ohirame, she begins to pull all of these Mamushis into a singular black hole. Kind of like how she did to Ryu. And Delta stares on in awe as she's blown away by the fact that Sarada is able to handle all of these Mamushis simultaneously. And as all of these, mind you, full-powered Mamushis get pulled into this black hole, they're powerless against the pull, pulling them towards one singular point. But it's this moment that Sarada lets Delta know, while her ability seems crazy powerful, because objectively it is, she's only able to affect things with her gravity that she can see with her eyes, telling us what we basically already knew about Ohirame, which is that Sarada needs to select the things affected by her gravity with her eyeballs. However, Delta picks up what Sarada's putting down, as both Delta and Sarada are looking in the same direction, and thus Delta looks behind her and sees a group of Mushi running away from them in Sarada's blind spot. And thus Delta flies away and tells Sarada to allow her to take care of the Mamushi in her blind spots. And take care of them she does, as she immediately catches up with the landlocked Mamushis and flies in with modified claw-like feet as she kicks the head clean off them. And after she's done using her feet, we see Eida using an ability we haven't seen her use in quite a while, her anti-regeneration eye lasers. Very same eye lasers that she tried to use against Himawari and Naruto that caused for Kawaki to lose his arm. And honestly, in the panel where she uses them, she looks like Supergirl. It's kind of sick. It's kind of nice to see Delta reinserted as an important and powerful character, because she is both of those things. I mean, this cyborg went toe-to-toe with adult Naruto. And yeah, adult Naruto was trying to not kill her, but adult Naruto also had to try the hardest we've seen him try since Naruto the last in a fight against her. I'm okay, it's not entirely accurate. He had to try harder in the fight against Momoshiki, but still. But she's not done, as she shows that these boots are meant for more than walking, as she flies up into the air over 2 terrified Mamushis and stomps amplified high heels through the back of both of their heads and out their eyeballs. It is a crazy metal panel. And while she does all of that, we flash back to Sarada, who explodes her gravity well with enough force that it blows away all of the Mushi that were sucked into it. Another ability that comes along with the Ohirame that she specifically used to destroy Ryu just 10 or so chapters ago. Basically, by collapsing the gravity well upon itself, she's able to eviscerate anything in contact with it, even if that's 12 or so full-powered Shinju. However, immediately after eviscerating all of these Mushi, we see her Mangekyo Sharingan, specifically her right eye Mangekyo Sharingan, begin to shut down and bleed. And while obviously that's not crazy, this jutsu is a derivative of Amaterasu, which we know is probably the most damaging jutsu you can use with your Mangekyo Sharingan, based on the fact that it made both Itachi and Sasuke go blind after less than 10 uses, and after she's deactivated her Mangekyo Sharingan, she lets herself down to the ground, but immediately begins to grip at the right side of her head. However, she's still conscious. See, this is already a big upgrade from the first time that we saw her use Ohirame. See, because not only is she now better at using Ohirame, obviously, because she knows how it works, and she was able to use it on multiple targets simultaneously, even those attacking her from her blind spot, but also after using it to explode a Shinju, Sarada didn't immediately collapse and go unconscious. Though she's obviously not in, like, the best health, this is a definitive upgrade for not only her Mangekyo Sharingan, but also just, in general, her total chakra. However, upon seeing her friend clearly exhausted and maybe in pain, Delta flies over to her and asks if she's okay. And it's at this point we see something very interesting. See, because at this point, we pop into Sarada's POV. And we see as Sarada is trying to stare at Delta, that Delta is already blurry. And yet Sarada assures Delta that she's fine, even though she's already going blind. And now I know some of you are already trying to write, oh my god, Sarada's the weakest Uchiha of all time. She's going blind after 2 Mangekyo Sharingan uses. But I'd like to remind you that Sasuke, who was using a substantially weaker jutsu in Amaterasu, was going blind in his right eye after just 3 fights. Sasuke uses Amaterasu on Killer Bee, the 4th Raikage, and then Danzo. And by that point, after he's defeated Danzo, he is basically blind in his right eye. Like I said, Amaterasu and its derivatives are the most damaging Mangekyo Sharingan abilities you can use for your eyes, while other Mangekyo Sharingan abilities like Tsukiyomi, Kagutsuchi, and Kamui are substantially better for your eyes. I mean, none of them are good for your eyes, but they can be used more often than Amaterasu. Thus, there is no propaganda to peddle in terms of Sarada being weaker than people like her father. However, it does raise the very good question of how Sarada is going to continue using her Mangekyo Sharingan with no EMS in sight. And if I had to take a stab at it, I'd say it has something to do with her left Mangekyo Sharingan ability. But who's to say? That sounds like a video for another day, which is why you gotta be hitting that noti bell, baby, because that's the next one up. Anyways, after seeing that Sarada is going blind, we pop back to Lord Kobu, who's either barely escaping the attacks of a Mushi or getting hit by him. And it's becoming more and more increasingly clear that Inojin, while controlling this uncoordinated and un-ninja-like body, won't be able to outrun Mushi forever. And thus Kashin Koji, through his toad, is telling Inojin, cut off the connection, cut off the connection. Kobu is going to die, regardless of whether you're in control or not. So it's either you die with him or he dies alone. But eventually Kashin Koji takes the choice out of Inojin's hands as he snaps in front of his unconscious body, waking him up. Now, I don't know why that would wake him up out of mind transmission jutsu. Does that not seem like a gigantic weakness? Like, when has it ever been established that mind transfer jutsu can be broken with a snap in front of your face? And maybe that's some like Kashin Koji specific ability? Maybe something to do with his sage mode? I don't know. But regardless, Inojin jolts awake, and Kashin Koji immediately tells him as soon as he wakes up, it was only a matter of time until Lord Kobu dies. And we need you. Unless we flash back to Lord Kobu as he regains consciousness and realizes he's surrounded by a gang of Mushi. And immediately he begins to panic. Now, this is interesting. See, because last month or so, we said that Lord Kobu was going to be aware of the fact that Inojin controlled his body. Because pretty much every single time we've ever seen mind transfer jutsu used, the ninja who was being controlled was fully aware of what their body was being forced to do, and could even most of the time see the person who was controlling them. But maybe because Lord Kobu isn't a ninja and therefore has no training in mental chakra, or I guess mental energy, his personality was so completely suppressed by Inojin that he not only had no idea what his body was doing, but also didn't know that Inojin took him over. Now we then cut back to Inojin and Kashin Koji as Inojin is screaming at Kashin Koji that Kobu is a civilian and that he shouldn't be forced into this kind of situation. But all Kashin Koji says is it's time to resume the mind transmission jutsu, because all of Inojin's allies need it. And every second that Inojin was using to save Lord Kobu's life with a mind transfer jutsu, he was leaving his allies without information on the battlefield. And honestly, this is a fair to decent point. About the mind transmission jutsu telling all of the people fighting against Mushi inside of Konoha the exact location of said Mushi, Inojin was risking more lives than just Lord Kobu's. It's kind of like the trolley problem. Inojin had to abandon one life to save many. However, his inability to make that choice could possibly lead to the death of many others inside of Konoha, as there's now 200 rampaging Mamushis. We then cut back to Lord Kobu, who's trying to scooch away from all of the Mamushis, asking who they are, what they want. But in this moment, we see Inojin re-fire up his mind transmission jutsu, and the second that he does, he connects to all the people he was talking to previously and tells them about Lord Kobu on the roof of the Hokage's office. And he tells somebody to go save his life. Probably not what Kashin Koji wanted, but the morally correct thing to do. However, before anybody can get there to save Lord Kobu's life, Mamushi grabs Lord Kobu by the scruff. He makes fun of him for scampering around this entire time and asks him if he knows Eida's location. And he lets him know for the grievous sin of attacking him earlier, he's going to die now. However, before the Mushis are able to finish off Lord Kobu once and for all, Sai and Shikamaru bust open through a door to get to the Hokage's office roof. And as they open the door, they see Lord Kobu engulfed in flames fired by a Mamushi clone. And the Mamushi laughs as Lord Kobu burns away in front of him. However, before Lord Kobu can pull a Might Guide post 8th gate, Boruto flies in and decapitates all 6 of the Mamushi with one swipe of his sword. Now, obviously, we talked about this. We talked about the fact a couple of weeks ago that the second that mind transmission got shut off, Boruto seemed confused, but aware that more likely than not that Kashin Koji was planning something. And thus we theorized that Boruto would most likely be the person to save Lord Kobu. However, what we did not take into account is the fact that Lord Kobu would be in charge of his own body when he was saved by Boruto. See, we estimated that Boruto would save Lord Kobu either while he was unconscious or while he was still under the control of Inojin. And therefore, Lord Kobu wouldn't be able to give Boruto the credit that he deserved for saving his life. But that's seemingly not the case. Lord Kobu is not only in charge of his body, but also is fully aware of the fact that Boruto is the person who saves him. See, because not only does Boruto cut down all the Mamushi attacking Lord Kobu, but he also points his karma seal at Lord Kobu and absorbs all of the fire ninjutsu off him, saving his life. And Lord Kobu seems as though he's in shock as he stares down at his body and his charred clothes and looks over to his side and without a word realizes that it was Boruto who saved him. Now immediately Sai and Shikamaru run to Lord Kobu's side, and Shikamaru tells Sai to take Lord Kobu to the infirmary. But Lord Kobu is furious, asking what attacked him, at which point Shikamaru lets him know that these are things called shinju. And he continues to go on saying, I hope you now understand the severity of the situation, and I hope that you will let me continue to do my job. And while in this moment, Kobu acquiesces, saying, I will let you do your job. However, these interrogations are not over. And when these interrogations are done, I will make sure that the Land of Fire takes action against you. And considering the fact that it is now very clear that Shikamaru and Boruto are working together, as Lord Kobu is literally staring at them, standing side by side, fighting against these Shinju, it wouldn't be hard to build a case that Shikamaru was compliant in Boruto's release. However, at the same time, now that Boruto has saved Lord Kobu's life, Lord Kobu does technically have less incentive to go after Boruto with the ferocity he had previously. So as to what's going to happen with Shikamaru, as to whether or not he'll be deposed as the 8th Hokage, or maybe Lord Kobu will see the light and realize that Boruto is a good guy, we can't say. That is until another video. So make sure you're hitting that noti bell, because that's coming out after the other one. But as Lord Kobu walks away with Sai helping him to the infirmary, Boruto looks down at Kashin Koji's toad and says, was this your plan? To facilitate a situation where I could save Lord Kobu? And Kashin Koji says, well, but that was one of them. However, it still would have been better to have him die. And honestly, he's not wrong. Well, yes, obviously, this opens the door to the idea of Lord Kobu being sympathetic to Boruto's cause. Those wouldn't be sympathies that either of them had to worry about if Lord Kobu was just dead. However, once again, this is widening the gap between Boruto and Kashin Koji idealistically. Ideologically, that's the word I was looking for. A gap that's been growing ever since Kashin Koji was okay with Konohamaru, effectively Boruto's big brother, dying in battle against Matsuri. And thus, while I don't believe that Kashin Koji has a heel turn in him, I do believe he might be building himself into a kind of anti-hero. An anti-hero who's going to exist in opposition eventually to all of the morally upstanding people on Team Boruto. And while I don't know if there's enough meat on that bone yet to make a full video, you best believe in this upcoming week, I'm gonna be thinking about it. We'll then in the next panel see Shikamaru report back into everybody that Inojin's mind transmission jutsu is back up and running, which obviously makes Eida very happy, as now she's able to know what's happening around her, and thus she asks Shikamaru what's happening outside. And Inojin steps in to say that Mushi's numbers have increased, that he's now up to 200 clones. And Sarada also checks in and says, and they've gotten to such a number that their intelligence has dropped, and now they're just rampaging. And thus Shikamaru says, I get it. We'll have to use our last resort. Which seems like it's good news to Team 10, which has fought to the point of exhaustion, as we see Shikadai sweating and Chocho using her partial expansion to punch the heads off Mushi. And as Shikamaru reveals that they're gonna be swapping to their last resort, Kawaki goes, and that is? At which point Shikamaru reveals that the last resort is to lead Mushi to Eida, which obviously Eida isn't too excited about. However, Shikamaru reveals that all of the Mushi have hit a level of intelligence where the second that they hear what Eida's location is, all of them will swarm there. And thus all of Team Boruto will work together in one area to try and wipe out all of the Mushi simultaneously. Obviously, this is massively concerning to Eida, who's realizing she's going to be used as bait, but very exciting to Daemon, who says, straightforward. This is how I would have liked to do it from the beginning. And thus it's revealed that in chapter 32, we're getting Daemon on the battlefield. One of the strongest characters in the entire universe who we hardly ever get to see fight, and actually really haven't seen fight since he battled against Code in part 1, which also had something to do with Bug. All that is to say is we got a lot more great Boruto on the way, because the end to the Mushi invasion most likely happens next month. But I'm curious to hear from you guys. What did you love about this chapter, and what are you looking forward to in chapter 32? Let me know in the comments below, and while I got you down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, Danny and Penelope are coming over, and I have to prepare.